this is Dane Shoemaker with the Shoemaker Films podcast. I'm here with Dr. David Weiman.
Pleasure to be with you.
How are you doing today?
I'm well.
Good. Executive coach, management consultant, doctorate of psychology, entrepreneur. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Weiman Consulting?
Not a half-bad baker of cookies. Weiman Consulting is a leadership consulting firm.
Okay.
And that's sort of vague and maybe intentionally, but there's three core services we provide.
Okay.
And sometimes it's helpful to give an example of each as I go along, which I can do. So
perfect.
The first part is talent assessment. And we have clients who are technically screening senior executives and senior staff who they're bringing on, but they want to get a sense of how good a fit is this person for our culture. And the way that we work. What are the strengths and the development needs they might lead in a leadership role that we can find out in advance? So an example of that might be a real estate investment firm is looking for a chief financial officer, and they have three finalists, and all of those three can do the job, but they're looking for the degree of fit with the firm, the culture, and what they've created. And even saying real estate investment firm, now that I think about it, there could be 5 different firms that operate very differently. So we look at the firm and the person and give them a sense of how good that fit would be. So that's an example of the talent assessment service. And we do an assessment of the person using some structured questionnaires, an interview, and then we feed that data back to the client, usually with a quick phone call, and then we have a full report of what we found. The second bucket is executive coaching. And we can either be hired by a company to provide it for a leader, or sometimes we have leaders or people who own entrepreneurial businesses who are looking for that themselves. And we also have just private people who want coaching, usually for business leadership, or they're in a company, but they want to pay for it privately. And in all of those examples, we're usually doing an assessment first and some interviewing to find out as much as we can about the person and the various aspects of strength or maybe some development needs that they have, prior experiences. And then we give them some feedback, create a plan, and start the coaching. And the third area is leadership development, and that has 2 kind of subparts to it. One is an organization may want to develop an entire team. And so we might assess that group and give some suggestions for how they could improve. Or they might be looking for a seminar of some sort. And I enjoy doing them, but also they're very helpful for getting a team to have the same kind of information at the same time. So it might be a 90-minute seminar on conflict resolution as an example. Or it could be a 3-day program on different leadership tools that a company wants all leaders at a certain level to have.
So out of those 3, I mean, are you focused more on one area? Is it kind of equal? Where do you think most of your time and energy goes towards?
It's almost evenly divided among those 3. And I think that some of these services lead to other services. So for example, if a company hires us to do a 360-degree assessment, which is sort of what it sounds like, it's an assessment that focuses on one person, but their boss, their peers, and their direct reports will be solicited for feedback, and that all goes into one report about them. It's very natural after that. We've already gotten all this data together and given them feedback. Coaching programs are a natural follow-on to that. Or if we do a seminar on a topic around a certain kind of issue that might benefit a team, that might lead to us then doing talent assessment to make sure that they get the kind of people that they want on that team. So we get sort of, I call them follow-on services to a primary service that we offer, but maybe that's a super long way of saying, yes, it's kind of evenly divided.
I mean, it makes sense if you've been able to build the trust and show the value of your services. It makes sense. So that's interesting. How did you get started in this? I mean, what does your career look like?
I never had a psychology class in high school or college.
Oh, really?
It was a total career change for me. My undergraduate degree was in religion, And I was very interested in marketing. So the first jobs that I had were in marketing. And if you think about religion, because I got this question a lot when I was interviewing to be a copywriter, they'd say, well, I see 1,000 English majors. You're the first religion major who's ever walked in here. And if you study, like, religion is something that people make, in some cases, the most important thing in their lives. It's very central.
Yeah.
But they don't get a guarantee for it. They can't possess it. They can't return it. So if you can understand how religious leaders convey that kind of importance to people, you kind of know a little bit about marketing, right? And started out as a copywriter, then began working for a publishing company right down the road here in Devon. And I became the vice president of marketing of that publishing company, but always had an empathic desire to help other people. So in my late 20s, went back to graduate school, got a master's degree from Penn in counseling psychology, and then another master's and a doctorate from Widener in clinical psychology. Was working part-time the entire time I was in graduate school. I was still working at the publishing company.
Yeah.
And I thought, are they eventually going to say, like, why do we have a psychologist as our marketing director? But it worked really well because the more I learned about psychology, the more I thought about how to reach people and connect with them over wants and needs that were important to them. Yeah. And eventually took the step that I think a lot of entrepreneurs have to deal with at some point, which is I had a full-time job, then it was part-time when I was in graduate school, then I started my own shop.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, just going back to psychology and marketing and sales is really all psychology if you look at it.
But our entire lives were, I don't mean this like a great colleague of mine, Dave Fries, says, we're sort of marketing all the time. So if I was at a friend's house and they told their daughter she couldn't have dessert unless she finished her dinner, and at 6 years old, I saw her out negotiate these two people, one of whom was a Wharton graduate. Like, she didn't finish her meal, and I had brought dessert, which were these like giant brownies. And she totally negotiated her, like, she was a brilliant marketing salesperson because although she didn't conform to that request of theirs, she did wind up with dessert and probably had the biggest brownie of the four of us. So,
nice.
But I think throughout life, we're doing that. We're persuading. And so Dave doesn't mean sales and marketing in a negative way at all, but we're persuading all the time.
Yeah. And I would say a 6-year-old, I have a 5-year-old, he's very manipulative, for better or for worse. So,
but it's, if you think about it, it's a way of getting what we need from the environment.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that age, just sort of negotiating back and forth with adults, particularly in a home environment where you're safe, is a great way to learn. Like, what happens when I say this or that? Or what if I don't do something I'm asked to do?
Yeah. We're all running little experiments all the time to see what the reactions are.
And I think the world of work is the same way.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Just the religion component. Are you a religious person? Did you have goals of going into?
Yeah, I liked the
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah. I liked, in undergraduate, the study of what was ultimately important to people.
Yeah.
Like, that felt important to me. And so I think I'm a spiritual person more than a religious person.
Okay.
But definitely what was of ultimate concern to people was very attractive to me to study that and to sort of see how religions are similar all over the world and what kind of connects people potentially.
Yeah. Yep. One of the things that I noticed about you is I think you're a really good storyteller. Would you agree with
that? I hope so.
I think just, and even just doing some research on this, I went on your LinkedIn earlier this week, and a lot of people just have their resume with bullet points, and you have a really nice intro to, when you first got a phone call.
Yeah.
In college about going to, your first, for the publisher was the marketing
for Wendy's. Yeah.
For Wendy's. Right.
I'm sort of a child prodigy in marketing. And so I was the marketing director for all the Wendy's in South Jersey when I was still in college.
Yeah. That must be an interesting story there as well. But you did it really well where, kind of, bring it back to what you're doing now and, kind of looking at the pain points of what your clients are that you work with now. I forget exactly how you worded it, but if you, I'll take your call, for that. So I just think you're really good at writing.
Oh, thank you.
and the way you present yourself is great.
Thank you very much.
So when did you start Weiman Consulting? When did you took that leap from into entrepreneurship, and what was that? What was that experience like?
Even in graduate school, I wanted to be prepared when I left for what the business would look like. Mm-hmm. And I jotted down ideas for what I wanted to look, what I wanted it to look like, and kind of kept that in a file as I was going along. And as I was meeting other professionals, if I liked the way that their practice was set up, or I liked the way that they did different things, I would keep notes about that. And so when I left, I was employed by the publishing company, and I had a few part-time jobs. And that gave me the time to sort of put together a business plan. And I showed it to colleagues in and outside of psychology.
Okay.
And I had one mentor in particular who I mentioned, Dave Fries, who said, eventually you have to let go of the main part-time job for the publishing company if you want to move forward with that business. So it was in January of 2001 that I was ready at that point, because I had talked to my boss at the publishing company and asked him could I do this work instead of as a part-time employee. If I were to create my own business, would you be willing to be a client? And it made sense to him because the costs of having me as a part-time employee would go away, but we'd still have this connection. And at that point, I had worked there 12 years, I think, full-time, and continued for 8 years. So understanding that they would become a client gave me the confidence to go out on my own in January of 2001. And it was really executing the plan that I had been creating for years prior to that. So this definitely wasn't like a sudden moment where I was like, I'm mad as hell and I can't take it in, or whatever the phrase is from the movie Network. But I had always, and in fact, it was, now that we're talking about this, it was a mentor of mine at Wendy's who asked me if I wanted to forego my senior year of college to work there full time. And I said no. And he said, I was asked to ask you that, but I'm glad you said no. And also, I feel like in the future, you won't work for someone else. You'll work for yourself. And to be told that at 19 or 20 was really powerful, because this was a super successful person.
Yeah.
And Julian Oskowitz was the name of that supervisor. So that kind of got the idea in my head, what is it like to be on your own, to run your own business? I also think that just in terms of style, I liked the idea of having my own thing, creating my own, my own assignments and serving my own clients.
Yeah. Yeah. I certainly think that's not a goal for everyone, but it's a human desire to build something and, provide for people around you. So, so that at that point, was that your first client? Did they move forward with you being a client, your former employer?
They did. And I had already prepared a letter of agreement about that client relationship.
Okay.
And I had it on my desk in my office. I went over to see the publisher and he agreed. And the very first thing he said is, why don't you draw up a letter of agreement that explains what we just talked about? And I said, I think I can do that. So I walked back to my office. I waited a couple of minutes and then I brought him the letter that I had already prepared.
That was quick. Yeah. Yeah. So what was that like, that relationship then? Because it's a different dynamic. It's less of, David, can you do this? And then it's more of consultative. I mean, you're now a contractor or a consultant, right? So
it's funny now that we're talking, a lot of things are occurring to me that haven't occurred to me before in talking about this from your questions. But one of the things that I think is a way of feeling when I have a really good connection with a client now is I'm part of that organization. And there are some clients where if I've worked with them enough, it's in order for me to have access to files or connect with other people, I might have an email address with that company or a way of accessing files or documents.
Yeah.
I might go to their company events and it feels like more collegial than client and provider of a service or consultant. So I think it just felt like an extension of that relationship. And I think that our job security is kind of a perception of our job security, because we can always be fired from a company. So in some ways it felt a little more secure because I wasn't worried about being fired. Not that that's something that was on my mind all the time, but it felt like there were ways to enhance that relationship with what else I could provide beyond what my part-time job was. And that turned out to be the case. So it was a really good relationship.
And things that are more in your control, right? Than if you were just working for them, you're kind of at the mercy of what their budget is or whatever's going on,
right?
Macro. Yeah. That's great. What were the next couple of years like in building Weiman Consulting? I mean, did you have a next couple of critical clients or other milestones that?
I really believe strongly even now in the kind of the social group that we're in as a source of referrals. So the very first thing that I did was I created 3 seminars that I offered to do at no charge. And I called them like lunch and learns or something like their luncheon seminars, because I had so many friends in business and I didn't want to impose on them or market to them.
Yeah.
But I said, I have these 3 programs that I'll do at no charge, and they'll happen over lunch. So your employees aren't going to miss any time. But it was a way for me to get accustomed to meeting new people and getting in front of a group and learning about what issues they were having. And so the second client, or the first one that I was getting outside of that publishing company, asked me to come in and do one of the seminars was on conflict resolution.
Okay.
And I was asked to come in and do it. And as we were picking a date, she said, I really think we might need you to work with this team, not just talk with this team.
Yeah.
And can you do that? And that started a long-term relationship. I mean, it's a 20-year relationship it turned into. So the Gateway project was helping that team manage conflict in a more sort of productive way. I mean, to a certain degree, you want diversity of thought and ideas, and you want people to debate in a team.
Yeah.
And this, when it goes over the line from being constructive to destructive, that's where it can be helpful to have someone outside of all of that come in and help with it. But that was the very next kind of that method of offering something of value without expecting I did not expect anything in return. It was really helping me refine my public speaking skills, which were rusty at that point, and getting accustomed to doing seminars. But at the publishing company, they also started having me get in front of groups.
Okay.
So some of my programs were on the psychology of marketing and selling handcrafted jewelry. And that helped me kind of learn how to put together a program, deliver it, get feedback, and react to that feedback.
Okay. So that jewelry marketing videos that are up on your YouTube, that was stemmed from the publishing. Got it. I was trying to figure out where that fit into your career a little bit. Yeah. It's fascinating. And they're really interesting too.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So that's great. And you mentioned, I would say that, what you did in those early days, doing free seminars, lunch and learns, providing value, that's really, and from what I see in building my company, Shoemaker Films, I mean, doing free stuff. We've done a lot of free work to free videos for companies, and that tends to come back, and we're doing this, in a way that's, I'm not expecting anything to come back. Right. But the world kind of has a funny way of rewarding that in a way. So and building relationships, building referrals. Just from a, marketing standpoint, I mean, what are some of the things that you're doing today? I mean, I imagine that, you're in a very specialized field, you have probably a lot of referrals or business contacts, what do you do? What does that flow of clients look like typically? I mean, are you working with a lot of, I know I'm throwing a lot of questions at you now, but like, how many clients are you working with at any given time? Is it really just like one engagement at a time, or is it multiple?
It's
and
multiple.
How are you finding clients, I guess?
It can be multiple engagements at a time. We have some long-term work that we've done with clients over years. and some individual projects where we're brought in to do one thing, we do that thing, and then that project stops.
Right.
Coaching engagements, excuse me, tend to be, they start out often as a 6-month engagement that can be renewed. And so that's an example of a situation where we might coach someone for 2 years,
Oh, wow.
but it started out as a 6-month engagement. The talent assessment, we're like in my field, there's no way to plan ahead for that because people call us when they need that.
Right.
And for the clients who use us regularly for talent assessment, they've used us for years. So we have a system set up when we get that call. There's usually some urgency around it.
Right.
We're ready to go within, a short time of getting that email and get that started.
Oh, that's great.
So the overall picture, like we were talking about at the beginning, tends to be about a third talent assessment, a third executive coaching, and a third leadership development. But what's, in any given time, what pops up, we respond to. And I like when I say we, I have a part-time colleague, Lauren Schechter, who's been with me 5 years and just does a phenomenal job. So we work on these projects together. And as things come in, we have a system for moving them along together. And that works out really well. Yeah. With regard to the marketing piece, we have the sort of like the big chunks are a monthly newsletter we do called Leadership Update.
Okay.
And that has a quote that I like and why it's relevant for leaders, a book I'm reading, it might be a piece of fiction, but I trying to relate it to leadership. Mm-hmm. Lauren does a section on lifestyle, which is actually when we track the clicks, most of the clicks come from Lauren's lifestyle section.
Okay.
And those could be holiday related, fall cocktails or things to do. I think one last year was what to do with the Halloween pumpkins that you might have. It was like 24 things to do with pumpkins. And then I have a feature piece.
Okay.
That's usually, we try to keep it like under a 5-minute read because our clients and readers are busy.
Sure.
So that's one main thing. And that goes out by email, usually the first weekend of the month.
Okay.
The second, so that's for our mailing list. We also do a quarterly physical marketing piece on a different topic. We want people to have something in their hands. I'm a little old school that way. And also we don't want to use one method of marketing everything. And we have a weekly video called Rise and Wine. Mm-hmm. And that has a specific purpose attached to it that's reaching out to people who may haven't been to a seminar of mine. And it's a way of them recalling what it was like for me to just talk to them, if that makes any sense. Yeah. So it really had a specific niche, but which is on LinkedIn primarily. Okay. But we get a lot of feedback about it from Facebook and Twitter also, because those are the other platforms that we use. And then we have weekly quote picks or blog. We have a weekly blog that Lauren puts up. Okay. Yep. So it's fairly, there's a steady pulse across these different channels. The key to all of this to me is reaching out to people one-on-one. And making phone calls just to check in and see how someone's doing. Yep. So that's another component to it because you don't know what's happening when you put something out into the universe, whether it's social media or otherwise. But picking up the phone to call somebody and connect with them with the real intention of just seeing how they're doing is impactful. And so the best outcome from one of those calls is that someone felt listened to, not that I sold them something. It was like what you were saying before, not that I got something out of it other than they felt better afterwards just from someone listening to them.
I think people appreciate that human connection, and being face-to-face as well is really great. You mentioned also the mailing. I mean, I really like that. We're in digital marketing these days, but having something physical in your hands, really, that's something that people don't do a lot now, so it kind of cuts through the noise a little bit. At least in your space, I think, you get these window contractors in your mail every day or, landscaping or whatever it is. But I think, something like that is definitely unique.
In the pandemic, we sent out in a packet a tea bag, coffee that was in a little slim pouch that you could use, instant coffee, and a packet of hot chocolate.
Yeah.
And the appeal was, nobody's meeting in person, but why don't we have a virtual cup of coffee, tea, or hot chocolate together?
Yeah.
And a lot of people contacted me and not only set up those meetings, but made the coffee, the tea, or the hot chocolate. And we talked over that. So I think that it's, the more novel ways and senses that we engage people, that physical thing matters. Being able to take something out of a 6x9 envelope, padded envelope that has coffee, tea, and hot chocolate in it.
Yeah.
I think that appealing to these multiple senses really matters. So that's another part of the strategy is Rise and Wine is something you can listen to. Transcripts of Rise and Wine or blog posts, because some people prefer to read than to watch something.
Yeah.
We have audio things that people can listen to, and we have the physical, the marketing pieces that go out quarterly that they can physically think it's a tangible thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really about being there when people need you as well. Marketing's kind of just a constant thing. As soon as you stop doing it, though, it can be, you'll just, people might forget about you or something like that. The Rise and Wine piece is very interesting to me. I'm very impressed. Tell me a little bit more about that. I mean, it's weekly. I see them on YouTube all the time. So when they pop up,
a
lot of times they're just
also, I forgot about
that. They're short, minute and a half, 2 minutes long. Where do you find the inspiration for the things that you talk about in the Rise and Wine?
The way that it started is we were not doing anything on video. And a colleague of mine who still works with us, Kendra Prescott, said, hey, like when you're walking around the office and you say, I just remember this scene from The Princess Bride, and it talks about going back to the beginning. And sometimes in life, I think if we're just like not really sure of where we should go, maybe going back to the beginning matter, like maybe like what's our foundational purpose in life? And she said, when you do that, you should record that because a lot of times they were just spontaneous thoughts that I had. And if Kendra was around, I would share it with Kendra, or we would talk. We worked together in the same office for a while. And I said, oh, well, should I have a title and credits? And she says, no. She said, some of the most popular videos right now coming from people like you they're talking about something as if there's another person there.
Yeah.
And I said, so no captions? She said, no. And no music? And no. She said, just the way you do it in the office where you just start talking about something. Yeah. That's it. And I had a mug that's over there on my desk that was given to me as a secret Santa gift by the publisher who was my first client, Joe.
Oh, no
Breck.
Way. Wow.
And Joe, he thought it was funny because it said Rise and Wine, WHINE on it. And I had it for years. I loved the mug. And I thought, I'm just going to call it Rise and Wine, and I'll hold that mug up at the beginning of each video.
Yeah.
And it's paradoxical because I'm not a whiner. I'm a super optimistic person. But other than that, there was no reason for that title.
Yeah.
And the very first one, I noticed something on the back of a coffee packet that said it was nutty and bold. And I thought, well, that's a great way to be in life. And so the very first video was me talking about that thing, the back of that coffee packet.
Okay.
And I remember showing it to my mother, who passed away 2 years ago. And my mother was an actress her entire life. And she was pretty critical. And she looked at that video and she said, I don't know, like the camera's pointing up at your face. That's not a very, good angle. But she gave me a lot of good constructive criticism for it or feedback. And so I just raised the camera up and I showed her the next video. She said, that's it. And so with the support of your mom, particularly
mom who's
an actress, up until the end of her life, I would show her Rise and Wine on my phone each week. And she was a good gauge for me of, was it interesting? Would it create questions in someone's mind? Did it have the impact that I was looking for? But the origin of it was Kendra suggesting it. The market was the people who had seen me in seminars, but I hadn't been in touch with a while.
Okay.
And the purpose was to remind them of what it was like to have a conversation like this.
Yeah.
And we get a lot of feedback through email or messages from people saying, I loved it. And I'm not the kind of person who publicly comments on things, but here's what it meant to me, that whatever that particular topic was.
Yeah, no, it's really great. I mean, it's just the fact that, it's every week, you're consistent about it. It's not high quality, but it's like, it's something is better than nothing. And honestly, for a lot of people, with all these cameras and mics and lights, it's like kind of overwhelming. And like that can be an impediment because,
right.
If you think you need to have a nice mic and a camera and all this stuff, it kind of becomes, well, I don't feel like setting all that stuff up. And really at the end of the day, it's more about the content and the substance of what's in a video. And, I just kudos to you.
Thank you. And Kendra was really the driver behind it. And I remember saying to her, well, when I do, like when we take one of my seminar videos and create a product out of it, it's edited, and we use a production house like yourself to do that. She said, no. And I said, well, what if I make a mistake? She said, well, then you made a mistake.
Yeah.
And she gave me the example of somebody she really liked who would do these impromptu, informal videos. And she said, like, if his cat walks on the sofa, the top of the sofa behind him, that's in there. So I'm like, so I don't edit. Like, I still was having trouble getting my head around it. She showed me an example of what she was talking about. But to your point, it's not normal for people to never make a mistake or say or say the wrong word.
Yeah.
So to some degree, her instincts were right about connecting with people without it being a edited product.
Yeah.
Because that takes away the kind of the informal connection to it.
Yeah. And I think, authenticity has become kind of a buzzword lately, I think, but really it's authentic because it's you, it's talking to, and even, we all have cameras in our pockets now. So, just, it's a matter of just doing it and rather than not doing it. Right. Yep. And just getting your thoughts out when it's timely.
It helps that it's on a schedule, and I actually use a separate video camera for it.
Okay.
And a tripod set up with the exact height every time. And, but other than that, when I sit down to record it, what I do is what goes out. And I really appreciate from your awesome professional background, the feedback, because it's helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. I think more business owners, especially service providers, consultants, they could take a page out of your book.
Thank you.
So I guess, just a couple closing thoughts. I mean, in your career, I mean, what are some key, I guess, advice that you would give to, just specific to your niche, in talent assessment, leadership coaches? What are some common things that you come across that maybe, you can help with, or people can just find out on their own?
I think that in terms of what I feel is a big value that we provide, oftentimes people are at work every day, like the owner of a business, and they're getting the job done. And they're working hard to do that. And they might not realize I call it a noble quality they have, that, like, always taking care of people. When they spot an employee who needs something and hasn't asked for it, but they notice it, offering something to that person. Maybe it's a day off, like, hey, I know, your kid's not feeling well. Take tomorrow off on us and just handle that. I see that as noble. And sometimes the person at the top isn't getting feedback from other places in the organization. So I try to notice the noble things about our clients and share that feedback with them, because I think they might not see it as noble because to them it's just part of getting the job done. Or they might not have heard that before. Like, nobody pointed it out, but when you do, they go, whoa, like, I do that. And that is important to me.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes focusing on those values that even they might not be aware of is something that's a particular thing I try to do. I know Lauren tries to do the same thing in our work with clients. We're really there to help people who are good get better.
Yeah.
So for example, we don't work with somebody, if an organization says this person isn't a good fit, they're not performing well, we're having trouble motivating them, and but for coaching, we would fire them. That's not a good role for us. because it's possible that it's just not a good fit between that person and the organization.
Yeah.
And we don't help companies fire people. That's not what we do.
Right.
But if somebody, I guess it's like the old joke, how many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is one, but the light bulb has to want to change. If somebody wants to change, if they want to get better, if they're open to feedback, that's an excellent fit for us for coaching and leadership development.
Mm-hmm.
If a company says, I've been telling this person for 5 years, whatever it is they've been telling them, and we need someone else to tell them, we're not really the right firm for that, because we're very much about helping people identify and capitalize on strengths, not criticize or make people feel cruddy.
Yeah, they're not checking a box, an HR box when they're hiring. Yes. Yep. Just kind of in general to, your entrepreneurial journey, starting Weiman Consulting, any particular things that you were able to overcome or think that, you might have advice for people thinking about going out on their own? Or
there is it can be lonely doing an entrepreneurial role. When you're in an organization, even if it's a smaller one, there is a sense that there's backup and there's systems and there's processes. And those things, that kind of structure helps somebody feel psychologically safe and comfortable within the organization. Know the degree to which you need structure and things like that and strategy, because for me, having a business plan really mattered. Having a method of managing projects, like project management method, really helped. I benefit from that structure. I'm a little more kind of loose in some ways. Lauren is much more detail oriented. So having somebody in the business who has qualities, we're both empathic people. We both want to help people. We're skilled at that. But having somebody whose style complements yours, or whose talents and gifts complement yours, helps. And the other thing, and I mentioned this because it came up also in a recent podcast that you did with Glenn Amaral, who's a mutual friend and colleague of ours, is having kind of your personal board of directors.
Yeah.
So I mentioned Dave Fries, who was a mentor. He was one of the people who was helping me with the move from working for someone else to going out on my own. I also had an accountant who I talked to about the financial piece of it. My cousin is a business attorney. I had her help me with understanding what's the structure of this going to look like. With that, even though I'm one person in the business at that time, having that personal board of directors, and Glenn mentioned this in the prior conversation, helped me feel less alone, and it helped me have people to bounce ideas off of and to pressure test things. Maybe I had this wonderful idea that somebody would say, yeah, that's probably not an idea you do right away as an entrepreneur. Why don't you use your time in a different way or focus on something else? So that was super helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, both things you bring up is just really about identifying where your strengths and weaknesses are and figuring out how to, complement that through people, through systems. Yeah. Well, this was a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.
I'm really glad we got together today. This was awesome.
Ton of value here. For organizations or individuals looking to learn more about leadership coaching, executive coaching, leadership development, talent assessments, how can they find you?
Weiman Consulting, WEIMAN consulting.com, has service list, has blog posts, has ways to contact us. By email, some frequently asked questions. There's video frequently asked questions there, although those, I am wondering how they would pass muster with you, but that one website, WeimanConsulting.com, is the best way to find out how to get in touch with us.
Perfect.
Or to get in touch with us. Yeah.
Absolutely. Great. Well, Dr. Weiman, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening today. Shoemaker Lab is an original production by Shoemaker Films, LLC. If you enjoyed today's content, please consider subscribing on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your content. Follow us on Instagram at shoemaker.films. And if you're a business that's either interested in our video production services or would like to be a guest on the show, get in touch by using the contact form on our website, shoemakerfilms.com.